Ben's family was celebrating a birthday party by the beautiful Caribbean Sea. Julian, Ben's mother, happily swims in the water, while Ben and his father Tom bond over fishing. Suddenly, Julian feels an unsettling presence beneath her. Just as she begins to relax, something pulls her underwater, and panic sets in. She cries out for Tom, but he and Ben are too focused on fishing to hear her. As she struggles to stay afloat, Tom finally notices her distress and jumps in to save her. With Ben's help, they manage to pull her back onto the yacht. Once safe, Tom reacts with anger and fear, while a shaken Cassie apologizes. Although they try to move past the incident to celebrate Ben's birthday, an uneasy tension hangs over them. Later that evening, Cassie received an urgent call from her boyfriend, warning of a dangerous storm heading toward the city. Alarmed, she ran to her parents, fearing for their safety. They decided to check the safety barriers, but were shocked to see whales and sharks violently circling their yacht. Tom grimly noted that these animals can sense an approaching storm. Suddenly, the yacht jolted violently, and Tom jumped into the water to inspect the damage. He found a deep dent in the hull caused by a shark. When he returned, he was bleeding, and Julian rushed to treat his wounds. Tension filled the air as Tom revealed that the yacht was too damaged to move, leaving them with no choice but to call for help. However, they realized they had no signals or radio communication and were completely stranded. Tom assessed their supplies and found only enough water for 4 days. Despite the worry knotting his stomach, he tried to reassure everyone, saying they were on a shipping route and someone would surely see them. Suddenly, a deafening noise erupted outside, prompting the group to rush out and witness a massive meteoroid hurtling toward Earth. Tom's heart raced as he desperately tried to start the yacht's engine, knowing the ship couldn't withstand more damage. With a sickening crunch, the engine failed, and they watched in horror as another meteoroid descended upon them. In a panic, they fled to the lower deck, clutching their life jackets as fear enveloped them. A thunderous crash followed, plunging them into darkness as they fainted, the nightmare just beginning. When they regained consciousness, disbelief washed over them. They were alive but injured. To their shock, a large hole in the boat had somehow kept them from sinking. Tom and Ben rushed outside only to find their yacht stranded in a desolate wasteland that had once been water. Tom's compass spun wildly, revealing that the earth had shifted, confusing their sense of direction. What used to be a roaring sea was now a lifeless lake. A chilling realization set in. Humanity must have perished in this disaster. Overwhelmed, Jessica fell silent and locked herself in a cabin, unable to cope with the devastation. Meanwhile, Julian fought to suppress her rising panic as she gathered the remaining food. Ben, feeling heavy-hearted, released his birthday balloons into the sky, hoping someone might see them and come to the rescue. Driven by desperation, Tom turned to the radio, his hands shaking as he sent out a distress signal, expecting only silence. To his surprise, a voice emerged from the static. It was a captain aboard a small submarine. He explained that they had survived the disaster because they were also in a vessel during the shift. However, the captain's news quickly turned grim. The Earth's poles had shifted, and in a week, they would snap back, unleashing deadly waves. He urged Tom to find shelter, saying it was their only chance. Julian swiftly gathered the children, urging them to pack quickly. In a moment of urgency, Tom pleaded with the captain for space on the submarine for his kids, his voice cracking with emotion. The captain regrettably informed him that the submarine could only hold one more person. Desperate, Tom begged, "Please, take both children. I'll do anything." After a tense pause, the captain reluctantly agreed. Tom calculated their location and told Julian they could reach the submarine in 2 days before the waves returned. With fear in their hearts, the family set out the next morning. But as Tom looked into the distance, his blood ran cold. A strange man approached, limping with a dog by his side, and something felt off. Tom noticed the man was injured and instinctively offered him water to help ease his pain. But as the man drank, his gratitude quickly turned sinister. Without warning, he lunged at Tom, stabbing him in the hand with a dagger. Julian, watching helplessly from a distance, screamed as the man attacked her husband. Overwhelmed with rage and sorrow, she knew she had to protect her children. She rushed back to the yacht, hiding them in the cabin and giving Cassie a flare gun, instructing her to use it only in dire need. The intruder reached the yacht, and Julian, trembling, locked herself in the washroom, praying for safety. She watched in horror as the man searched the boat frantically, devouring any food he found like a desperate predator. Julian held her breath, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. When the man approached the cabin, he found it empty. As she bolted from her hiding spot, her heart raced with a desperate need to escape. But then, the sharp bark of the killer's dog pierced the night, sending a chill of fear through her. Panic set in as she tried to silence the dog, trembling with guilt and crouching beneath the boat, hoping she hadn't been seen. For a moment, it seemed like Julian might escape. The killer was searching, his gaze scanning the area, but when he spotted his dog lying far from the boat, realization hit. Julian's heart sank. The chase was on again. Instinct took over as he dashed back into the boat through a broken window, his body slick with sweat. But luck was not on his side. The killer suddenly grabbed him with strong, icy hands, tightening his grip around Julian's neck. Pain surged through him, and his vision began to fade. Yet a spark of survival ignited within him. With all his strength, Julian fought back. From the cabin, Cassie watched in horror, her pulse racing. She knew she had one chance. Aiming the flare gun, she fired it at the killer. While it didn't injure him, it ignited the yacht in flames. As the fire blazed, Julian, fueled by survival instinct, grabbed his children and fled the burning vessel. But the killer lunged at him once more. In a desperate move, Julian kicked him away and scrambled off the yacht, gasping for breath. Cassie and Ben sobbed nearby, their father's lifeless body lying on the ground. Ben was crushed by guilt, wishing he hadn't released those balloons. Tears streamed down Julian's face as she held her husband's body, grief overwhelming her. But there was no time to mourn. She saw the killer emerging from the flames, a terrifying figure. Gathering her children, they fled into the night, stopping only when they collapsed behind a hill. Every shadow and whisper felt like the killer was close behind. Ben, red-eyed from crying, refused water when offered, his face filled with sorrow. They all sensed there was no escape, but Julian couldn't let herself believe it. Her children's lives depended on her. Her heart raced as she spotted the killer still pursuing them. With renewed fear, they ran, their bodies aching. Poisonous waters lay ahead, but they had no choice. Julian urged them on, even as Ben began to falter from dehydration. Cassie broke down, accepting the darkness that loomed, but Julian refused to give up. "Do as I say," she urged fiercely, and with trembling steps, they continued. In the thick fog of despair, Julian and her children discovered a crashed plane, offering a glimmer of hope. They entered, exhausted and heavy-hearted. As the children slept, Julian held a family photo, overwhelmed by memories of Tom, but she had no time to grieve. Outside, darkness loomed, and the killer was still nearby. Tensing up, Julian spotted him lurking and sprang into action, attacking him in a desperate fight for survival. She stabbed him repeatedly until he lay still, and a heavy silence settled with the dawn. The killer's body, ravaged by the elements, served as a chilling reminder of the danger still present. Julian knew they couldn't stay. They had to reach the submarine where the captain awaited. However, the sea had more in store for them. Ben, delirious from thirst, drank from a nearby pond despite Julian's warnings that the water was poisonous. She pulled him back too late, and he fell ill, his face pale. They constructed a small shelter, the burden of survival weighing heavily on them. That night, strange sounds echoed around Julian, filling her with dread. When she stepped outside, her heart raced at the sight of a swarm of crabs advancing toward them, their sharp claws glinting ominously in the dim light. Fear swept over Julian, and without hesitation, they began to run, adrenaline surging through their bodies. In the distance, a massive cargo ship appeared, standing like a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. The ship was stacked high with containers, and inside, people were hiding, desperately trying to escape the horrors outside. As Julian and his children approached, the people on the ship quickly locked themselves inside one of the containers, the heavy metal doors slamming shut with a loud thud. Julian's voice filled with desperation as he banged on the door, pleading for help, but no one responded. Behind them, the swarm of crabs advanced relentlessly, a terrifying wave of pincers and legs. Driven by terror, Ben and Cassie scrambled onto a container, and Julian, heart racing, tried to follow. However, just as he was about to pull himself up, a sharp pain shot through his leg. A crab had bitten him. Stifling a cry, he tore the creature away, blood staining his leg as he quickly tied a scarf around the wound. Dizziness overcame him, and he fainted from the combined effects of pain and fear. When Julian regained consciousness, the first sight that greeted him was horrifying. The same crabs were now attacking the container, their claws ripping into the metal as they launched a brutal assault on the frightened people inside. Screams filled the air as those armed with weapons fought valiantly to fend off the crabs. But no matter how many they killed, it was never enough to stop the relentless onslaught. Morning light slowly seeped in, casting an eerie glow over the grim scene. Julian's head throbbed painfully, and a wave of panic washed over him as he realized his children were missing. His heart clenched tightly in his chest, and dark thoughts spiraled through his mind. This was a place of death, and he feared the worst for Ben and Cassie. Tears filled his eyes as terror gripped his heart. But then, through his blurred vision, he caught sight of two familiar figures in the distance. Ben and Cassie, returning from a search for food and weapons. A wave of relief flooded over him, rekindling a spark of life in his heart. As they regrouped, Julian grimaced in pain while tending to the wound on his leg from the crab bite. Ben examined the weapons they had gathered, the heavy burden of their survival weighing on both of them. Desperate for help, Julian reached for his radio to contact the captain, but his hope dwindled as the captain's weak voice crackled through the speaker. The captain had also been attacked by the sea creatures and was badly injured, unable to provide further assistance. His words echoed ominously in Julian's mind. Soon the sea would return, bringing those deadly creatures with it. Julian's heart sank further when the captain revealed that, amidst the chaos, he had lost the map to the submarine. Hope felt like it was flickering out, dimming like a dying flame. Just as despair began to take hold, the captain fired a flare into the sky. Ben spotted it immediately, and for a brief moment, hope flickered back to life. Without wasting a second, they set off quickly in the direction of the flare, driven by renewed determination. In the distance, they spotted a small yellow submarine, their last chance for survival. However, dread washed over them as they realized a toxic wasteland lay between them and the submarine, a deadly stretch that could sicken or kill them before they reached safety. Tensions rose when Cassie lashed out at Julian, accusing him of failing to protect them. Her words deeply wounded him, and despite his exhaustion, he sharply reprimanded her, his voice cracking with guilt and fear. As they pressed on, another tragedy struck. A sudden landslide sent Julian tumbling down the jagged rocks, crashing against a large stone and becoming trapped. Cassie hesitated, torn between staying with him and moving forward. Julian, barely conscious, urged her with tears in his eyes to save Ben. Heartbroken, she pushed on with her brother. When they reached the submarine, their relief quickly faded as they found no one there to help them. Desperation grew as they knocked frantically on the door until the captain finally emerged, injured and bleeding. He chillingly informed them that he had little time left, but 3 people could still escape. Cassie's heart sank as she thought of Julian. Meanwhile, Julian fought off crabs with his remaining bullets, each shot more desperate than the last as the creatures closed in on him. Just when it seemed hopeless, Cassie arrived, grabbing his hand and pulling him to safety. They ran together, their legs burning with exertion, and dove into the submarine just in time. Strapping themselves in, they faced the terrifying sight of a massive wave surging toward them. The submarine rocked violently, and everything went black as the wave hit with overwhelming force. When Julian finally opened his eyes, they found themselves not in the water, but dragged into a ruined city, a haunting place devoid of life. The silence was deafening, and the weight of their survival settled over them like a heavy fog. Julian looked around, filled with grief, fear, and a bitter sense of relief.